Hello, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Poets and Quants' Online MBA panel. Today, we're talking about the student experience, and we're joined by alumni of top programs to tell us what it's like to get an MBA online. Please feel free to use the Q&A function to submit any questions you have for our panelists. I'll do my best to get to those at the end of the session. So let's begin by getting to know you guys a little bit. Please take a minute to introduce yourself, your current position and work experience, and your online program. Excuse me for that. And if you have a fun fact about yourself, please share that as well. Nicholas, we'll start with you.
Thank you so much for the introduction. So my name is Nicholas Kirpon. I'm currently in Atlanta, Georgia. I am a recent graduate of USC Marshall's School of Business online program in May. I work for Biosense Webster, so it's a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson. I'm a market development manager. And a little fun fact is I got into USC Marshall undergrad, decided not to go, so I'm happy that I made it a full circle experience.
Very good. George, how about you?
Awesome. My name is George Karubala. I'm based out of Chicago. I've been in the tech industry for, I would say, over 20 years now. Currently working as Vice President of Global Pre-Sales and Solutions Consulting for Reich, which is a subsidiary of Citrix. So I've been with Citrix for nearly 10 years. As far as the program, so I'm with the Gies School of Business at University of Illinois. This is year 2 for me. It's been fantastic so far. And a fun fact, I'm a musician, so when I'm not working, I'm usually making music right there.
Nice. And Travis, how about you?
Hi, Christy. My name is Travis Baldwin. I'm in the Houston, Texas area, graduate of the Jack Welch Management Institute. Currently, I am a director of global business development for a software company, and also starting down the path of creating a development company focused on sustainable, low-impact luxury multifamily housing to start getting after some of that. Fun fact about myself, I guess 2 factors. One, I'm a direct descendant of William B. Travis from the Alamo. And the other one, I went to art school before starting my business journey. So
oh, those are interesting facts, actually. So welcome to all of you, and thanks for taking the time today. Nicholas, we're going to start with you again, and we'll just kind of start with the decision-making process that you all went through. What led you to pursue an online MBA? Did you consider a full-time or other programs?
So, Christy, I think I began with the thought of, I just believe in progression in general, right? So I was a business marketing undergrad major, and I knew an MBA would be somewhat in my future. So, when COVID happened, I think it just really, just jump-started the thought of going into the MBA program sooner than I think I was expecting. I absolutely considered a residential experience. And during the interview process with USC, they asked the same question, maybe you would be a good candidate for residential, but I think gaining experience while also getting an MBA was important for me. I was still kind of early in my career, and I wanted to get those years of experience. So I think USC was just a great combination between gaining the experience, but getting a full-time MBA experience in an online format.
Yeah, absolutely. George, what about you?
Yeah, so I did not consider a full-time program. So where I'm in my career, so I was really not after the degree, I was after the education, right? So I come from a tech background, engineering background, and in the position that I'm in, I lacked a fundamental, some fundamental background in accounting, finance, and I needed to fill that gap. And what I was doing was I was doing these certifications online through Harvard and others. And I realized that my organization pays for a proper degree. They don't pay for these certifications, and it makes no sense, right? So I looked at programs, and I guess the other piece is, I think Nicholas hit on this, right? Education, when you can apply it as soon as you learn, it's much more effective. And so I wanted to learn and apply what I'm learning as much as possible. And one of the beautiful things about the Gies program is you can choose how you structure your module. So I could pick the courses I wanted to do in line with what I'm doing at work, and that worked out really great.
And Travis?
I guess similar to both Nicholas and George in the sense that I had hit a spot in my career where, to one side of Nicholas's point, I did want the MBA, the prestige of the business degree, the credentials to help with the promotions to open future doors. But also a lot like George, the most important aspect to me was the knowledge to help with my business skills, knowing eventually I wanted to get into entrepreneurial endeavors and I needed those skill sets to really thrive. So I did look at a lot of different programs. I knew ultimately I wanted a well-reviewed, top-ranking program, obviously to help with opening those doors and the credibility of the program, but also the quality of the knowledge I was going to be getting through that. That was very important to me. But the other side of it is being a working professional, not 22, going right from my graduate degree into an MBA program. It was very challenging to stop all the responsibilities. I had a job where I was already working 50, 60 hours a week, traveled a lot globally around the world. So the idea of being able to say on every Tuesday or every Saturday, I was going to be in class at a brick and mortar situation just simply wasn't a viable option for me. So when I started looking at all the programs out there, I started looking at some of the online ones. And huge fan of Jack Welch, and my dad was always a fan, long line of entrepreneurs and big fans of his. So I called in, looked at the program, and realized how involved he was in the curriculum and creating it and everything else. And that to me, it was more than just his name on a building. It was him actually engaged in the curriculum, in the process, and handpicking the professors that went along with it. And George really hit on a key spot that stood out to me when I looked at JWMI, which was that applicability, because they pushed that very much, this idea of learn today, apply tomorrow. And it was that model where rather than studying case studies, you are the case study. So every class, when you come into it, you're going through the learning discussions each week, working with the professors on those skill sets and saying, how does this apply to me, my job, my role, whatever. So it's custom tailoring that education your whole way through and giving you actionable things that you can go in the very next day to the office and put into practice. So for numerous reasons, it fit my schedule. It empowered me to learn when I could learn and fit that around what I had to do with my real world requirements and everything along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. George, let's go to you next and tell me about some of the key factors at your individual program that went into making you make that decision to go there.
Yeah, so there are a number of factors. So I'd say the number one, I wanted flexibility, right? So just like Travis mentioned, I travel around the globe. I can't commit to doing something on a Thursday or a Friday. So I wanted one where there's a lot of flexibility in terms of when I can do my assignments, when I watch the lectures. So that was one. The second was I wanted a program that is progressive and evolves with time. So one of the beautiful things about Gies is if you look at the specializations, the way the courses are structured, I noticed that they keep changing that and evolving that based on where the industry is going. That was important to me. I wanted a global cohort because the world is converging. So for me, the ability to interact with people from around the globe and network was very, very important, and Gies has that. I think the other piece, cost, had to be at a price point where I was not looking to spend 200 grand on MBA, just the ROI wasn't there. I wanted an MBA from a reputed school at a price point that makes sense. And so it met that guideline as well. And then lastly, the faculty had to be reputed, which it was. So those are the kind of things I looked at.
Yeah, we love talking ROI at Poets and Quants for sure. And Nicholas, what about you for your program?
Christy, I think, to kind of piggyback off George, so the networking abilities were extremely important for me. And I think, I don't want to say the majority, but a great deal of people know about the Trojan Network. And I can say it is absolutely so true through my experience, pre, during, and then post graduation. And then, also I'm going to continue to stress, I wanted the full-time experience, right? I knew this was going to be in an online format, but we were doing live classes twice a week with asynchronous material. So you had that, interaction with your classmates, with your professors, weekly. You had your group projects, which, were real time. You meet with your group, via Zoom, etc. So I think between the, having that feel of the residential experience, and then, tied to, that network were two of the main two main things. Plus, I always wanted to be a Trojan. So,
Travis, what other factors of Jack Welch made you choose that?
Well, I mean, obviously with him being named CEO of the century, I mean, it out on his own. But it was more than just Jack himself as a singularity. You look at the Fortune 500 companies now, there are more people as CEOs that came up under Jack through GE than anywhere else. And that's because of the methodologies, the operations, the approach to business that he had that just permeated the culture and set those best practices in motion. So that's really a big part of the curriculum, is all those lessons learned, all the winnings by Jack and all those things that are intertwined into the Harvard case studies and the typical things you would expect from a top flight MBA program. And it really brought that to life in the way that it wasn't just a traditional educational experience at JWMI. The more I started to speak to the admissions staff, I realized how involved he was picking out the professors. And for Jack, the mission of the school is applicability. He really wanted to rid the world of bad managers. That was kind of his battle cry in setting up the program. And so with that, he was handpicking professors that didn't just have the terminal degrees or the doctorates that qualified them to teach at this level, which they all had to have. But he was looking for experts of practice, people that had decades in the field at VP, C-suite level, running major organizations in marketing or economics, whatever their particular disciplines were. So the enrichment of that experience is that you get the top flight curriculum. You're being taught by a professor that has actually been in the real world where the results are necessary. They've seen the trials of change management and adoption and what you need to look out for. Excuse me. And then you're in a small cohort of classmates of 18 to 20 people that you're having the dialogues with in a discussion questions where you're going over the learnings that week, sharing about your practice, your ideas, bouncing ideas back and forth from each other. Kind of, I call it the dojo scenario. It's kind of that training ground where it's okay to fall down and not always have the right answers, because you got the professor keeping the guardrails up while everybody kind of shares and interjects in. But ultimately, it gives you an enriching experience where you're learning in 3 paths: from your fellow peers, from your professors, and from the curriculum. And having that #1 in diversity program, you're in class with people from all over the world. So different pathways, different decisions, perspectives, et cetera, all of which heighten that experience as well. And going to your ROI that you mentioned earlier, and also to Nicholas's point, when I spoke to the admissions office, they had been tracking that data every single quarter because Jack was adamant, if it doesn't change your pocketbook, something's wrong. Like, why else were you there getting the MBA? So what they have found historically, and it still holds true now 11 years in, is that over 70% of the students are getting promotions just while going through the program, with a typical increase of over 20% to their net pay. And that's not, you've got your MBA, you're now ready for the next step. That's just the transformations that happen of learn today, apply tomorrow while going through that journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So George, will you kind of walk us through the student, the learning experience, what the classes are like, how many you take at a time, the chance to interact with professors and other students in, and how those interactions take place?
Yep. So again, this was another important factor in me choosing this program. So I think Nicholas hit on the fact that live component is important, and Gies has that. So the way, first of all, anyone who starts at a specific time has an option of doing the program in 2 years, 2.5 years, 3 years, some even a little more than that, which is nice, right? So for me, for example, I'm on the 3-year track because I want to take one course at a time, really absorb what's being taught and apply that to my work. And also I think if I do 2, then it'll be a bit much and I won't be learning as much. So I take one at a time. Every course is about 8 weeks long. So I do one course every 8 weeks. Each course has an asynchronous component, and then the live component, right? So you've got Coursera videos that you got to watch. You got assignments in Coursera that you got to do. Then there's a live session. You got to attend the live session. There might be some assignments assigned to the live session as well. Then you've got team projects. So I'd say on average, most courses are at least 25% team based. Some courses more so than others. The one that I just did was more like 50%. So it depends. If it's marketing, maybe more team engagement. So every week, on average, I spend between 10 to 12 hours per course on assignments, group work, all that good stuff. In terms of how you structure it, I've seen programs where you have to do X, Y, and Z modules before you go into the next one. Here it's very, very flexible. Like you can start with strategic management, you can start with entrepreneurship. You want finance, do that, right? Like, so that gives you like the path that different students take varies quite a bit. So that's kind of an interesting aspect to it. So that this notion of the same group of people doing all the courses along the path, it's not quite that. It's actually much better in many ways because you see people in the course at different points of the program. So the level of experience that they bring, the conversations, everything is pretty diverse, which I really enjoy that aspect. So that's kind of the program in a nutshell. In addition to doing the courses, we have to do 3 specializations, right? The 2 that are like each of the core subjects, right? So like you can do management or finance or entrepreneurship, and another specialization or what around the overall program. So that's the expectation as far as in addition to the courses, you've got to do those as well.
Great description. Travis, how about you?
Similar but different to George. So similar in the sense that because it is asynchronous, the classes are taught where every week the professor uploads their videos, information they want to share. There's also what we call the experts of practice, which are over 50 different CEOs from Fortune 500s that know Jack that come to add to the program and talk about different things. So, and in addition to the case studies or whatever might be pertinent that week. So every week it starts off with your videos, the classroom from the professor, and then your reading. And then that goes into the discussion aspect of it. So that's really where that team, that engagement of your peers comes through every week, is with the DQs, not so much in teamwork or cluster work with a few individuals, but rather an open share with the whole classroom in which everybody's reading and responding to ideas. And it really is an immersive experience that I actually found I quite favored over a brick and mortar, where typically the professor's talking, you're busy scribbling your notes down, maybe the same 1 or 2 people raise their hand to answer questions, and the last 80% of us are in the back just trying to keep up with things. The DQs actually made it come alive because everyone had a voice. There wasn't that quiet person in the back of the room. Everyone's engaged, everyone's talking, doing their assignments, and engaging with each other. And because it's that writing format, people tend to have a little bit more anonymity, so they're a little bit more boisterous in sharing ideas, those kind of things as well. So you do get a good sharing environment that happens on the weekly. And whenever the professor does something live, you're able to attend, but it's always recorded. So again, depending on where you are in the world or what's happening, you can always access it after the fact. And I found the professors incredibly engaging. They don't have the typical office hours. Instead, they give you their cell phones and their personal emails and say, when you have a question, call me. If we need to set up a time to chat, we'll arrange it. So if you're over in India and you need to chat at certain times, we'll arrange a period that works for them and balance those schedules out. So very approachable, very engaged, and in the DQs heavily involved as well. So actually a very fun kind of rhythm that it forms. Also a lot like George, it was a quarterly kind of system with the classes. You can take 1 or 2 at a time. I'd also, George, preferred to do the 1 at a time, mainly because of my career and the workload, but I did want to learn. And I just knew 2 classes stacked on top of that was going to be overkill for me personally. Some people can do it and handle it, and that's awesome, but I was not one of those. But yeah, wonderful experience.
Nicholas, how about the learning experience at Marshall?
Christy, I see the value in these, right? So I'm listening to George and Travis and definitely the different perspectives from their programs. And, I think, what USC Marshall, I would say it's flexible, but then it's also inflexible in some aspects. So it was a 22-month program from start to finish, but then you also had the ability to do semester by semester. And I think you had the opportunity to do that within 5 years to confer the degree. And what I loved about USC Marshall, although we didn't get the experience, but they did give it to us later once COVID subsided a little bit, you begin on campus, right? So you do a 1 week, or it's like a 2-week block program. 1 week is asynchronous and some modules. And then the following week, you fly into California, you're on campus, you're staying on campus, and you're really interacting with your classmates and your professors. And then really that kind of kickstarts your program. And then you begin into your first semester. So how USC does it's 15 weeks and you have 4 classes all weighted differently. Let's say you have 2 core classes, 35% each, and then you have 2 other classes, 15% each. And over the course of that 15 weeks, you get 1 grade. So let's say you got a B for the 35%, A in the other 2 15s, and then it calculates into your overall grade. And again, like I mentioned, you have two live sessions during the week. I'm an East Coast guy in Atlanta, so my class was from 9 to 11 p.m. And I know some might think that that's late, but for my schedule, it worked great. I got to focus on work during the day and then really had some time to review material and then, to log on. So you certainly had to stay on top of your material during, your course. You had tests and submissions, of essays, etc. And I think just again, the collaboration piece between USC, you were assigned a group of 5 individuals. So that was your group during the course of that semester. And what I found was, even to the last final we took, we were still studying with that same group of people. It was really what I'd like to say was a safe space for me, just to always utilize, lean into those, 4 individuals. And I really enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, very good. Nicholas, we'll just stick with you real quick, just to talk about the teamwork versus individual work. What's the breakdown, and tell us how the teams kind of connect and work with each other?
So I'm going to kind of work backwards. So my capstone project, I think this was like eye-opening and really kind of solidified the experience, was I had an individual living in South Korea, another classmate was in Germany, one in California, one in New York, and I was in Atlanta. And, I think Travis hit on this. We were genuinely working, we were doing work off camera. So we were just ensuring that, the work was, constantly getting done. And it was neat. We were joking because, when South Korea was up and we were sleeping, or vice versa, the work was constantly, being worked on, and the project was progressing. But I would like to say that the program itself was heavily team based, right? So we were genuinely always in groups. So I think it was definitely team based and a neat experience.
Great. George, what about you?
Yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, I would say on average, it's about 25% of the time that we spend on team projects. And in terms of how we would go about scheduling it, so Gies offers Workplace, which is Facebook's professional kind of collaboration platform. So that's what we use to interact with each other. So we'll discuss what works for everybody, and much like Nicholas, our groups vary all the time. We might, they try their best to put people in the same time zone, because there's a survey that we all do at the beginning of each course. But invariably, once in a while, there's going to be like this course this year in summer, one of my team members was based out of Korea, and we make it work, right? We figure out something that works for everyone. We'll meet over the weekends or weeknight, discuss, do our different parts of the project using Microsoft Teams or G Suite. There are all these different collaboration platforms that are available to us. So we kind of collaborate kind of asynchronously on these different projects. And and then eventually someone decides, okay, I'm going to do the submission, I'll do the proofreading, whatever. And then we might use sometimes WhatsApp to have some conversations as well on the side. So I find that every single time, and this is one of the aspects I like, right? Because every single group that I'm in, there's a person from either like Africa or Korea or India, and it makes the overall exercise so much more fun, because in addition to the education, what's really important is to understand cultures and just diverse perspectives and thinking. And as you sit and listen to these people share their insights on different projects, you broaden your horizons, and that's really what I love about the program.
Yeah, very good. Travis, what about you?
The team projects at JWMI, there's only, or at least I know the coursework is always developing every quarter, they're reviewing and updating, etc. But at least when I went through the program, there was only 2 courses where there was team activities that you actually, an actual team project. The rest of it wasn't truly asynchronous, and then within the DQ. So during those 2 times where we worked in the groups, it was just as George described. We picked the modalities of communication, what was going to be the best way to move forward, kind of structure out who's doing what, and then just had our check-in points throughout the weeks as we move through.
Great. George, going to you, tell us about the opportunities at Gies to, participate in extracurricular activities, student organizations, and if you were a part of any.
Yeah, so first and foremost, the one thing that we all look forward to, and is iConverge, which happens every September. That's the that conference where alumni, current students, everyone gets together. It's so popular that people start talking about it like in Jan, and the event's in September, and the chat just they're like all sorts of different activities that the school organizes, but more so what the students organize. It's ridiculous. I'm kind of blown away by the banter around it. So that's one. But in addition to that, there's a number of student-led activities. What I love about Gies is the students are so passionate about the program, and they start all sorts of things. Right? So we have a student council that has, that kind of serves as the voice of the students and, leads all sorts of different activities. But beyond that, students take it upon themselves to start things, right? So for instance, I'm in Chicago. And in Chicago, I can think of at least 8 different groups, like, West Chicago, North Chicago, Chicago, South Chicago, like people that just meet and, have formed friendships, have taken part in entrepreneurial activities, have helped each other with jobs, all sorts of things, right? And which is beautiful. Since I started the program in 2020, I initiated something called a coffee chat. So we get together every Sundays at 3 p.m. a bunch of us. Now I think that's like 140 members or something. And any point in time, maybe 25, 30 of us get together. Before, like a week prior to the meeting, we will crowdsource some ideas. We all vote on the idea. We identify someone who's going to kind of lead the discussion. And we have a fun time. We have all sorts of great conversations. We get guest speakers sometimes. So lots of activity. So this is one of the misnomers about an online program. People think that online programs don't provide opportunities for networking. And I always tell people, you get what you put into it. If you really want networking, there's more than enough opportunities. It's a matter of you taking the initiative or just showing up, right? If there's a local meetup, go show up, and the next thing you know, they pull you into all sorts of things, right? So it's been amazing.
Yeah. Jack, what's it like at Jack Welch? Or I'm sorry, Travis. I'm mistaken.
It's fine, Christy. I've been called a lot worse, I promise. No, and actually there's a ton of ways, and I think it really goes to George's point. Is I had that same perception coming to a virtual program that was going to be something that I was going to have to sacrifice for the sake of asynchrony, control, flexibility in my schedule, top quality education. And I was thrilled to find out that couldn't be further from the truth. I think George actually surmised that very well. It's a matter of how active you want to be. But at JWMI, there are tons of different ways to get people involved and connected to the network. So we do have an internal, what we call JWMI Connect. It's like a private LinkedIn. Once you're an actual student, you're able to access it. You have to be a student or alumni to take part. But that'll let you connect to thousands of alumni and students all over the world. Over 70% say they're open to mentorship, so you can connect with people to get track records, suggestions, things like that moving forward, but also just to reach out to people individually. The classes are very small on purpose, and it's not cohorted, so you're always running into different people along your journey, but it's just a way to connect to the school at large. He also mentioned the student body. We have that as well, the Student Alumni Advisory Board, the SOB, as we refer to them. Those are individuals, students, and alumni elected every year by the student body to serve as their voice, help foster the community, grow the initiatives. And with that, we do a coffee connect once a month, same kind of thing, very casual, come get people together. We also do a cocktails and conversations on the evening hours, and also the kind of 2 different time periods for people around the world to kind of take part. There's also the global networking night we do once a quarter. That's a virtual day-long event that kicks off in Shanghai and Hong Kong and kind of just goes as the sun turns and ends up in Australia 14 hours later. So you can kind of come and go as it makes sense for your schedule, and when you have time in the day to just stop in and meet people from all over the world. And then we also have the ambassador program that's more of a boots on ground. That's local city ambassadors, student and alumni who get active, like George just described, to put on local events and network face-to-face, go out for drinks, get together for boating, a picnic, and whatever makes sense in the local area, and get people together that way. So tons of ways to get people connected and network. So I think George said that great. The virtual programs, you're not losing out on networking. Sometimes it can enrich it because it grows past the geographical boundary that you would get in a traditional brick and mortar environment.
Yeah, very good. Nicholas, what about the kind of extracurricular and club opportunities, networking also at Marshall?
George, when you mentioned passion, I think what's interesting is in the online format, I think there was in theory more passion, right? Because you had to put maybe just a little bit more extra effort just because maybe the boundaries were just larger, right? Yeah. And I think what was so great about USC is, right, a big group of our cohorts, they're going to Notre Dame games and they're going to the UCLA versus USC football games. And that's certainly going to be a constant thing, for our group in the future. And, I know past and, present, individuals. And I think the 2 areas I want to highlight were, I thought we were going to be disconnected from campus in LA, right? So I didn't think we were really going to be able to get involved on campus clubs, et cetera. And I was so wrong. So I joined a healthcare leadership association club. I flew out, went to a networking event, which, fortunately kind of helped me solidify my job with J&J now. But I say that because they were so welcoming. Yeah, when we, flying out there, they accepted you as, just as if you're a residential program. And lastly, there's, a new venture competition that Lloyd Greif, it's the entrepreneurship hub school on campus at USC. And every year they do $150,000, venture seed capital. And, prior, I think they didn't really allow it's not that they didn't allow, but they didn't, once COVID happened, they allowed more for, the online format. We can present and we can try to secure funding anywhere in the world. And that was big, big for me.
Yeah. George, talk a little bit about the work-life balance of doing an online program. You have work, school, personal life. How do you manage all of that?
Yeah, this was one of my main reasons for picking an online program, right? I mean, I was really concerned about it between a very hectic job, 2 little kids, wife who works, all the travel. And, if I say that, oh, it's perfect, I'm lying, right? I mean, that's obviously challenges, right? Like this last week was finals. I had family coming over. It was a nightmare. But for the most part, I would say that if you're disciplined and organized, it's totally doable. So I know many who've completed the program in 2.5 years, 2 years, having a very similar lifestyle to mine. I've chosen to go slow, but I think I have a pretty good control over my work-life balance. I mean, I typically, like I said, spend 10 to 12 hours, and most of the time I spend that time after my kids go to bed. So I'll sit after they go to bed. I'll sit, do my assignments. I'll spend some time before they wake up on the weekends. It's been very manageable. And again, this is a major advantage of an online program, right? The flexibility that it offers. So for anyone that's, a professional that's got, 10 plus years of experience, in my mind, online is the way to go. I mean, it's just, especially now with, education being, with the advancements in technology, with global cohorts, there's actually advantages to going through an online program as opposed to an in-person program.
Interesting. Travis, do you have any advice for how you balance it all?
Well, certainly. I mean, time management is a skill at the end of the day. Some of us are born like most skills in life. Some are better at it right from birth. Some you need a little bit of guidance and work, and some a lot of work. It's just one of those things. You got to find your rhythm. The nice thing about JWMI is, and I think for a lot of these online programs that are asynchronous, is it gives you that ability to shift what you're doing dynamically every single day. And that for my type of schedule is good, because I don't have the 9 to 5. Some mornings I'm up at 4 in the morning with companies in Australia. I may not finish till 11. You're flying. I mean, I never know where I'm going to be at. So the ability to say, I've got 3 hours to go at the airport, I'm going to do some reading and get some work done or whatever, and being able to fit those pieces together made managing what I had to do very, very easy. Typically what I hear admissions tell people is it's about 10 hours per week per class to kind of estimate adding to your calendar. And I think most of us, if we were serious about our life and looked at the hours, you can quickly see how you can carve out 10 hours a week, maybe a little less TV, maybe a little less that, but ultimately you can come up with that time pretty easily, especially when it's not 10 hours at once. You can kind of fracture it and break it up throughout the week. But the other thing that really made the experience great, Christy, was the fact that we were working on ourselves. We were working on problems at work while going through the program. So it wasn't so much an ancillary thing that you were doing, an extra add-on to your task, as much as it was something that was synergistically combining and making what you were doing in the day-to-day that much more impactful. You were getting better results, you were having better impacts, and that's what led to my promotions and everything else while going through it. So it's worth the time and the energy. I think we can all say 10 hours doing better the next steps of our life is a worthwhile investment.
Oh, very nice. Nicholas, what do you have to add?
Yeah, Chrissy. So just graduated May, and as I was reading my fellow classmates' LinkedIn posts, a word that kept being brought up was sacrifice. So and I highlight that as, so when somebody takes does an MBA, even if it's you have the ability to flex it and space it out, it's still absolutely a sacrifice. And I think the expectation should be you're doing this to further your education, to maybe enhance your family's life, etc. So it's not going to be easy, right? I mean, you're going to have to study hard if you want good grades, and you want, like Travis said, to make impact for his business or, the company he's supporting, it's certainly going to be, a sacrifice. But to that being said, I think, when you're going through it, and like I mentioned, the 5 classmates of mine that I began with, you lean on them, you lean on your classmates. If somebody's great on accounting and you're not, so I'm personally not, you lean on your classmates to, ask them for 15 minutes after class to help you study. So I think when you're going through the process and you understand your strengths and weaknesses, I think that helps you kind of understand, where your time needs to be spent.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have about 10 minutes left. So I want to ask kind of one more question along this vein before we get to some advice, which I think listeners want to hear. But can you guys each maybe identify like a hallmark of the experience so far for you? And also, what is the biggest surprise for the experience so far? And, Travis, if you don't mind starting on this one.
No, not at all. I would say, it sounds funny, but one of the biggest hallmarks for JWMI for me came in the very first class in leadership. Because it was truly an epiphany moment when you start to get into the coursework and understanding DISC assessments and profiles and different personality types and EQ and all these things they never teach you in an undergrad. Some people are naturally good at it, and have these skills. Others, myself, did not, and so they just kind of pulled back this whole new world of interaction with company associates, different personality types, how to lead up, down, etc. And that class for me was a big confidence boost. And by, the second class, I was already starting to really get behind some of the stuff and was already starting to get some movement in my career. So takeaway wise, the impact on that was, 3 promotions just while going through the program and 2 more since. So it's very real world. It had real world impacts for me. Bottom line, far exceeded the cost of the entire education. If you look at the difference in my salary now versus when I started, I'm making more than that every year. So best investment I've ever made.
Very good. Nicholas, how about you?
I think the hallmark would have to be, networking. And I think I understood the Trojan Network, but I didn't really ever see it in play until I was going through, through the program. And it was when I'm reaching out to individuals at McKinsey, Deloitte, your top tier 1 tech companies, Amazon, Apple, and then, clearly I'm in the healthcare space. So Edwards Life Sciences, J&J, Medtronic, et cetera. And, you're reaching out to these people. And, prior I've reached out to people on LinkedIn and you don't really get responses. But when everybody is, taking the informational interview or at least, passing you off to somebody that can continue the conversations to land with, these companies, I think that was just like, okay, this is why I'm spending, the amount of money to get my MBA, and especially at USC. And I think the one thing that maybe was a surprise for me was, I keep stressing I wanted this residential experience in the online format, but myself and my fellow, there was 3 or 4 of us, we created the second ever student-led club in AMBA. And I think it was just also there, I was like, okay, really, we can create these experiences we want. We're bringing in top med tech CEOs to these coffee chats, George, kind of, like what you're doing now, which I think is impactful, awesome. But I'm just like, okay, this is what I wanted. This is what I needed. I'm getting it, but I'm also working and, supporting my family, et cetera.
Yeah. How about you, George?
Yeah, so hallmark, I would say, is ROI. So I mean, simply put, because like Travis, I started a 1.5 years back. I've been promoted thrice. I've been, taken into all sorts of new, it's broadened my thinking. And I started off as an individual contributor. Now I lead a global team of 50 individuals. The way I think about things has changed. And so I love the fact that the program is so progressive. And, even since I started, they've introduced mergers and acquisition specialization. There's a custom specialization track, all sorts of new courses. So, and there's just so much value that, if you really want to learn and really progress your career and just adapt yourself, there's so much opportunity. So I've been able to really apply what I've learned and help, have that help my career. And it's not just my story. When I speak to people, I hear this repetitive pattern, right, of people really, really benefiting from the program. So that's number 1. Hallmark, I think in general, everybody gets true ROI out of the Gies program. In terms of surprise, believe it or not, I'd say it's networking, because coming in, most people assume that networking is going to be a challenge. And it's anything but that. It's an amazing culture. People, they have so much of an identity in that alumni brand, right? They just come in and just completely absorb themselves in that alumni way of thinking and help each other. I mean, I keep running into people who have helped others get jobs and whatnot, which is just fantastic. So yeah, so I would say the surprise is the networking. So if you think that an online program doesn't provide you the opportunity, you are going to be surprised.
Yeah, very good. Well, in our last 5 minutes, if we're talking about advice and you think about a viewer or somebody considering an online MBA, but they think they've been out of undergrad too long, or they're really intimidated by the quantitative courses, what advice do you have for someone like them who's really unsure if they could hack it, I guess? Oh, sorry, Nicholas, let's start with you.
So I interned for, it was called Corning Incorporated. It was in Corning, New York, and I was with Ivy League MBAs. So I was a undergrad intern, and then there was a Cornell MBA, and we're in this one-on-one, and I'm just learning about him. And he said, Nick, when you see these Apache helicopters up there, and he taught, he was in the Army for 10 years, and he was the instructor for the Apache helicopters. And he said, when you think that, you think of this just intelligent people that know everything. And he said, Nick, those people learning don't know anything, right? And they're flying these, beautiful devices. But my point is that, I think what stuck with me is half the people that we're all learning together. A lot of my classmates, that, might think that they know everything, don't, and you might not, you might know more than you thought. And I think it's just this ever learning experience. And I guess my thing is do it. But certainly understand the differences of the online and the residential, and truly understand what you're comfortable with and what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, thank you, George.
Sure. So I'll break it down by experience versus non-experience. So for the experienced professionals like me, I think the biggest worry is, oh no, work-life balance, right? How am I going to do this? The second thing that comes to mind is, do I really want to spend the money now that I'm already kind of in a good spot? Is it really, am I going to see the ROI? Answer to both is, work-life balance, absolutely doable. Just be organized, and you can achieve it, and you can do this program at your own pace. And consider, just look at me, right? I lead a really busy, hectic life, and I've been able to do it. I'm sure anyone can. The second thing about the ROI and the cost, again, I think for experienced individuals, my argument is, do you really see the ROI in spending 150, 200 grand? What are you really getting out of it? I think it probably makes more sense to do something like go to a good reputed program that's got a good curriculum that gives you the flexibility and gives you an opportunity to network. And there's many out there. We heard of 3 today. And so I think you're going to get much better ROI in a program like that. The third barrier, like for me, was, oh no, I have no background in finance, accounting. I'm going to really struggle in these courses. Absolutely not, right? Because I think the way most professors assume that you know nothing when you start. So long as you are watching the lectures, doing the assignments, doing the readings, you'll be just fine. So don't let that fear stop you. And also know that there's a whole network of people out there that are willing to help you as well along the journey. So don't let fear stop you. Just, dive right into it, and you'll be surprised at what you get out of it. Like I mentioned, for me, when I started and what my expectations of the program was and where I am and how my thinking has progressed is fundamentally like very different from what I thought. And I couldn't be more thankful that, in fact, it was my wife who forced me to do it. I'm really thankful to her for that. Now, for the non-business, inexperienced people, in general, I'd say that there are two, mainly there's one reason you're doing it, which is you want to bump, boost in your career. You want to get that degree and then hopefully get a pay bump or a new position. If that's your goal, absolutely, you can do that. And, in some ways, going with an online program like this gives you a better opportunity, because a lot of times in the full-time programs, you see people of your age, and you interact with them. Whereas in an online program, it's much more diverse, and you get to learn from people that are much more experienced from you, maybe even open up opportunities from a networking perspective. So there's the benefit there. But in general, I'd say it's best to do your MBA after a few years of it. Not too many, but if you can get 2 or 3 years of experience under your belt, you tend to get a lot more out of the program. But then to each his own, right?
Yeah, very good. Well, unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today because this was a very lively and enjoyable conversation. So I'm sad to see it end, but I appreciate all of your time and thank you to all of the viewers that turned in. We hope that you got some good information and helped answer some of your questions. So until next time, thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good day, everybody.